Good evening. Air pollution level in Kampala is 8 times higher than the recommended standard by World Health Organization. That means you and I are breathing in unsafe air. Joining us is Dorothy, air quality scientist, to shed more light on air quality in Kampala. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Norbert. Thank you so much for having me.
When we talk about breathing in unsafe air, what does it mean?
Well, it means a couple of things to me, but also to someone who is not a scientist, I believe, that every day that you're breathing in this dirty air or polluted air, you're reducing the lifespan of you're clearly living lesser each day when you breathe in this dirty air.
What are the most affected cities in Uganda?
I want to say Kampala right now because it's the heart of Kampala, like the capital city, and there you'll find a lot of transportation. You'll find people who are burning their waste because most of the waste that people have, they're not disposing it of well, and biomass to cook. So I would say Kampala right now, but after that you will then see a city like Jinja because also it's really much closer to Kampala in terms of development, and so I would also say Jinja is really leading up there in air pollution. Yeah.
When we look at the transport system, it's a biggest contributor, especially in Kampala. How do we improve the transport system to make sure we have to contribute to the good air quality?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you so much for asking. Transport is very contested everywhere, actually, because at the end of the day, you want to get to where you're going to, and so how do you then do it safely? So one can say active transportation, and when you talk about transport being a bigger contributor to air pollution, I want to say it like with a grain of salt because studies are still being done to actually put a number to what is really coming from the transport sector. But yes, when you look at the air quality monitors from Airco, you can see that during the peak hours, when traffic is high, is when you see the bigger numbers for pollution. And so when you say transportation, we're talking about engines, like the old engines, and also we're talking about the emissions from the roads, dusty roads.
We talk about encouraging walking and other things, but our infrastructure doesn't seem to favor that.
Yeah.
There are no lanes even for pedestrians to walk.
Yeah.
How are we going to handle that if we even don't have lanes for pedestrians?
Yeah, and I think it's very nice that you bring that up because usually when you look at pollution, for example, the indoor pollution, it's put on the individual. But when you look at outside pollution, the ambient air pollution, then we have policies, right? And so when you look at the transport sector, then you turn to people like KCCA, the Ministry of Transportation, like, hey, so for the roads that you're building, can you put walkways, for people to use? People in Kampala walk a lot. Just go to the city center right now, you're going to see people walking. So that means it's going to be very easy to shift someone's mind to walk more than take a taxi.
We have sung the song of poor air quality or unsafe air that you're breathing in for quite a while. Every other year, it is the same story. The difference is that the air gets worse and worse. How can we solve this problem for once and for all?
Wow, that's a tough one. But I want to push back a bit on we've sung this for a long time. In Kampala, it's only in 2017 when we had our first air quality monitor, and it was at the US Embassy, actually. I've been working around this space, I want to say from 2012, before we had the ambient air quality monitors, and I was really focused on the indoor air quality because of the biomass cooking, and the pollution that we see in Kampala as well, actually, is coming from the biomass cooking indoors, and that is specifically for who are living in Kampala City. When you burn your charcoal stove, you're actually contributing to the emissions that you're seeing outside. So while we're also looking at transport, you also want to look at the people who are using biomass to cook. And so when you say we've sung it for a long time, I think I am very excited that the conversation is now happening a lot. When I started doing this work in 2012, you barely heard of anyone doing air quality. You barely saw a report. You barely saw the news, right? But now I feel like with it coming to the surface more and people talking about it more, and we have the standards and regulations that are being launched today, I feel like now we have a way in which we're going to now okay, guys, for those who are using biomass, can we switch to LPG? Because what we're seeing outside is also coming from inside. And for the people who are doing the research like myself, I think just helping people like a normal not when I say normal, I mean like an ordinary Ugandan who is not going to sit an air quality class, to help them understand. And that's also the responsibility of citizens like yourselves, the journalists, to understand how to make this information more accessible to, say, for example, my mom who has not studied an air quality class, to understand like, okay, when I burn my charcoal stove, when I burn my trash, it's going to be into the emissions. Can I just dump my trash in a place that has been designated by KCCA? And so I think we are getting there. And also when you talk about air pollution, we're also talking about like equity. We want to talk about like when we say solutions, are they equitable for everyone? Vehicles, if you're talking about electric vehicles, is it going to be expensive for me who can't even afford a car to afford to buy a car?
Many people will say they can't afford to cook, for example, using electricity.
Yeah.
They can barely even afford a meal, some of the people.
Yeah.
So how will they afford to use the clean energy?
Yeah.
What they can afford is probably firewood from
Right.
what they can collect from within
Right.
the community.
Right.
So how are we going to tackle that
Yeah.
in a country where the poverty levels are quite high?
Yeah, you're right to ask that question, and that's something I think we have to like think about very hard as we do the research on air quality. The solutions that we're proposing, are they equitable? Is everyone going to be able to access the technology? If it's LPG that people are going to use to cook, how is that going to look like for a Ugandan who earns like $1 a day, right? And so this is why I say like I'm excited that the conversation is coming to the table, because policymakers, this is where we come in, they come in and they create policies that support technologies like solar, that support technologies like clean cooking. I've worked on the clean cooking technologies for the longest time. When I say longest time, it's been long when I've been looking at this research. And having a clean cook stove is not necessarily going to remove the pollution, but having an LPG stove, that makes a huge difference.
Let's talk about the impacts of us bringing in unsafe air. What does the research say?
Wow. So I think when we look at the research right now, we haven't done like actual studies, like real studies to know for a fact like this is what the numbers look like. Right now we have studies that have done like short studies, and those, yes, they are great, they give you a picture, but we need to have like real cohort studies to study someone from where you live and where you work, because even the traffic officers, their job is very dangerous, right? Because they stand directing traffic every day and they're breathing in dirty air. And so you find problems with people who have respiratory illnesses. Right now, pollution is linked to almost everything in the research. Like, talk about asthma, talk about heart conditions, talk about pressure, talk about diabetes. The people who are most affected are kids under the ages of 5 years. From the research, you find like those babies suffer the most because their lungs are still developing, and unfortunately every time they breathe in this dirty air, you see that their lungs are working twice as hard. It's also not all gloom. I think, like I said, the policies are there. Transportation, if we can clean our transport system, if we can pave the roads, the dusty roads, they are huge in contributing to air pollution. When you look at the data, it's like, it's bad. Biomass, it's bad. We can do something about that. So there are policies that can support this. So,
well, according to the research, improving air quality is everyone's responsibility. My name is Norbert Atukunda. Good evening.